Oh, hello. Welcome to another Tabletop Impulse video. In this video we're going to be looking at the Warhammer 40,000 Kill Team Lite rules that were released alongside the new Intercessor bespoke team. I must admit that Intercessor team kind of overshadowed the Lite rules. I know some other people have touched on them. I wanted to really go through them and try and help people understand exactly what these are. If you haven't seen them, I'll link to the Warhammer community article in the description, okay? So, it's Kill Team, more or less, on 3 sides of A4. Now, I don't know what they're trying to accomplish with this. It's really interesting in a number of ways. The first thing I think is pretty interesting is that they recently released the Warcry core rules for free, but they are not this. They are not abridged. They have not been rewritten. They're abridged in that someone has physically deleted the pages from the PDF pertaining to these scenarios and making the thing kind of unusable, yeah? But these have all been... Someone has sat down and rewritten Kill Team to fit on 2 pages. Now, some of you guys may have heard of a game called One Page Rules, which is a thing that existed, which started out as being very similar to this, basically like a simplified version of 40k, and they've got a simplified version of Kill Team, and a simplified version of Fantasy, and a simplified version of Warcry, and a simplified version of Kill Team is something called Grimdark Firefight. I wonder if Games Workshop is trying to eat the lunch of Grimdark Firefight. I went and had a look, by the way. One Page Rules isn't quite like the basic version of their core rulebook. It's still very lightweight, but it's like 11 pages or something. So I feel like Games Workshop's tried this before with, remember Aegis Sigmar when it first launched? And the whole game was on a few pages, and it was comprehensively rejected by the player base. So maybe they're testing, they see there's a market out there for this kind of thing, and they're testing the water again, perhaps. I think this one's going to fly under the radar of most people, but let's dig into it. So the first thing we're going to come to is setup. So the setup, I don't want to have to read out the whole thing. Okay, the setup rules, some interesting things. So it talks about gather miniatures for your 2 kill teams and their rules, 4 barricades, a kill zone, which clarifies is a 30 by 22 game board and terrain, combat gauges or a measuring device, and if you're using a measuring device it gives you the translation for all the symbols, 10 6-sided dice and some tokens. So this is clearly aimed at people who don't have any kill team stuff, right? It's aimed at people who don't have particular terrain, they don't have the measuring devices, they give you a conversion table so you can use a tape measure, you know, it gives you the dimensions in case you don't have a board so you can mark out your playing area. You do need these tokens, these attacker defender tokens, okay? I guess you could print this out and cut them out on paper to make paper tokens. So you set up the kill zone, decide randomly who's the attacker and who's the defender, unless the mission specifies. The defender selects a drop zone. If you're not playing a mission, and indeed there are no missions included in this pack, the defender selects one edge of the kill zone to be theirs. The opposite edge is the attacker's drop zone, is within blue of the edge. So if you're following these rules, you've got no access to any other rules, you're playing Kill Team Lite as it's written, then the mission is you deploy blue on and then you fight, right? Or 3 inches, I should say, in the spirit of Kill Team Lite, right? You are 3 inches on and then you fight, okay? And the winner is presumably the person that just is the last man standing. There's nothing in here about a turn limit. There's nothing to say when the game ends. So presumably the game just ends when it's time to finish. That's fine. That's how a lot of kids interact with Warhammer, right? That's how I interacted a lot with Warhammer when I started playing 40k. You know, I would put my miniatures in a big row. And my mate Tom would put all his miniatures in a big row, and we'd fight until one person was tabled or it was time to go home, you know, and we'd get into turn 7, turn 8, turn 9, didn't matter. That's how kids play Warhammer, and we should I really think that, and this is coming from my perspective as someone who runs, I run a school club, I think this is going to be great for that environment, you know, 11, 12, 13-year-olds. I think it's been written for them. Starting with the defender, players alternate setting up the barricades one at a time within red of their drop zone. The defender then sets up their operatives, followed by the attacker. When the player sets up an operative, it must be wholly within their drop zone, and it must be given an engage or a conceal order. Place the corresponding token next to it. You can change the order later in battle as described below. Notice what there isn't. There's no mission. There's no secondaries. So there's no tactical objective cards, shuffling, any of that. There's no scouting phase. You roll for attacker defender. The defender selects their table half and has to set up first and place the first barricade. There's nothing here to say the attacker goes first. You get straight into another roll off, which we'll see on the next page. So modifications, and they remind me of like Floorhammer or kitchen table Warhammer of old, right? So playing the game. We're going to start here with this sheet here. We got the begin the game section actually. Initiative phase. Players ready, all friendly operatives, token orange side up. Each player rolls a d6. Whoever rolls the highest decides who has the initiative. If it's a tie, the player who didn't have the initiative in the previous turning point has the initiative. If it's the first turning point, roll again. So it's not attacker goes first. It's roll off. It's change. Strategy phase is basically unchanged. Talks about the command reroll. Talks about spending CP on your strategic ploys or passing. We're going to talk about ploys in a minute as well when we get on to something else. We've got the command reroll printed there, and then we go into the firefight phase. And again, there's really they've rewritten this and reworded it, but there's really nothing that's changed that I spotted in this text at all. Okay, let's go here and look at this. Now, go and look in the core rulebook and look at how many pages this section needs to cover with all the actions. Yeah, they've got rid of some of the actions like pick up because there's no scenarios in the game, but they've gotten rid of a lot of verbs and they've more or less not changed the meaning of the text. They have made a few changes. Move is one of the biggest changes, to be fair, in the actions. So normal move, 1 AP. Move the operative no more than its M characteristic to a location it can be placed. It can't move through other operative bases or within engagement range of enemy operatives. An operative cannot perform his action within engagement range of enemy operatives or in the same activation as a charge or fallback. So we've lost charging, we've lost climbing, sorry, we've lost dropping, jumping, traversing. Those concepts are gone from this game. There's also no flying, so Harlequins don't move any differently to anybody else. Flying isn't a feature of this game. The rules can be found nowhere in the document. Okay. It seems to my reading like you can just move through terrain, like you have been able to in some editions of 40k, where you can just move through like the walls of a ruin, because like, oh, you scramble through or whatever. There's no rules for climbing, so I'm assuming either you can't climb, as we'll find out. There's no vantage points, so either you can't climb or you just move as if you had fly to climb, or they expect people to just intuit that you move up to the wall and then you measure up the side of the wall. But there's no rules for climbing. There's none of the rounding stuff. There's none of the, oh, it costs 2 circle. The concept of circle isn't really there. Okay. Shoot. I couldn't find any changes to what they'd actually done. They've taken out a lot of words from the shoot action. Make a shooting attack with the operative as explained on the following page, and it's down there, and you go all the way through it. I don't want to read all of that out, but you can go all the way through it. I can't find any differences in the whole of shooting. An operative can't perform his action while in engagement range of an enemy operative, or if it has a conceal order. Shooting is, as far as I can tell, exactly the same. It's not, because they've changed how line of sight works. But for the purposes of this section of the rules and this slide, shooting is exactly the same. Fight's more or less exactly the same. So charging, sorry, is exactly the same. Fight is the same, but they've got rid of the combat support rule. So the idea that if you charge into 2 models, the presence of the second friendly model would aid its compatriot. That rule is gone. But other than that, fights seem exactly the same. Fallback, dash, and pass all seem unchanged, but they're all now just worded so concisely. Same with Overwatch, that seems unchanged, but again, it's all just been reworded to be really concise. I quite like the. I'm a guy that makes 1 hour YouTube videos on the regular and gets laughed at because I say at the start of a video, "Oh, this is going to be a really short video," and it's a 10-minute video, and then people go, "You know, that's the length of a normal person's. That's the length of a normal person's YouTube video." I'm a very verbose person. I like a verbose rulebook. I appreciate the kind of slightly old-fashioned way of phrasing everything. I know that the whole world is moving away from that, and that people my age supposedly don't like really long. I love a really long formal email with withering politeness, but you read in lots of articles and things that it's all about being concise these days and being able to read things quickly and using plain English. I think there's a benefit to using the more verbose style of Games Workshop standard rulebooks, but there's obviously been a stylistic choice here to make it more modern. I feel like it's too modern for me in some ways because it's very this, it's very blunt, it's very this. Some people are going to love that. Some people are absolutely going to love that. I'm aware that I'm weird for not thinking that. Some people are going to love it. Other people are going to pick it apart because I'm sure it's not quite as tight. Right, I'm sure that the kind of people that go, "Oh well, I know what it means, but technically what it says is this," will find problems with it. Kill Team Lite's not supposed to be a tournament game, a competitive game, or even really a game played by adults more than like 2 or 3 times. Like the expectation here is that you play this game and if you like it, you go, "Great, what's Kill Team about?" If you're like an adult 40k player, or as I think it's going to get used a lot for clubs and kids playing around at each other's houses. Kids hate buying rulebooks. Oh my word. Running a school club. I mean, you can't blame them. Warhammer's already so expensive. If you've saved your pocket money or whatever, you've got 30 quid. Do you want to spend that on a book? Or do you want to spend that on a squad or a tank or something else? It's a no-brainer. The only way I always had rulebooks as a kid because my parents were really keen on reading. So my parents, they gave me pocket money, but they would always say, "But you can have as many books as you want." So codexes, rules manuals, all those kind of things. Mum and Dad would pay for those, but I had to save up my money for the miniatures. I think, and this is the teacher in me talking, that sitting down and trying to decipher the Games Workshop rulebook and work out how everything works probably does the kids a lot of good. But this is going to be an easier entry point. And perhaps getting them fired up and getting them playing some simple games makes them curious about the full length version of the rules. Now, hang on, what have I done? This is the same slide. I'm really sorry. Oops, no, it isn't. This is an error. This is just because I added in the damage thing. So damage doesn't appear to have changed either. Damage is mad though, actually, in that damage is a whole page. I think that's what about being concise. Damage is a whole page in the core rules, and it's been reduced to these kind of couple of sentences. Mortal wounds still exist in the special rules page. So in the core book, in the full version of the game, mortal wounds are mentioned in the damage section. They're not mentioned in the damage section here. Mortal wounds still work though because they're on page 3 on the sheet of all the special rules. Okay, no changes there. So just to recap, because I confused myself a little bit. Changes so far: there's no missions, there's no tac ops, there's no secondaries, there's no scouting phase, there's no climbing, dropping, jumping, or traversing. There's no flying. People may or may not be able to move through terrain. There's no combat support. Other than that, we kind of play in the same game. But here's the bit where they basically change the entire way of thinking about the game. So line of sight has been totally changed. Not totally changed, okay, but it's been changed somewhat. So you've still got the concept of visible, obscured, and cover, but they've changed what they mean. Visible is worded a lot less tightly. So visible says the intended target is visible if the active operative can see it. Look from behind the active operative and see if you can draw an unobstructed line from its head to any part of the intended target, excluding its base. Basically, it's the same words. They've just written it in slightly less specific language. Now, here's where things actually have materially changed. So, obscured. We don't have the concept of heavy terrain or light terrain. We have now large terrain and large intervening terrain and intervening terrain. So let's look at this properly. Let's slow down a little bit. The intended target is obscured if it's more than circle from large intervening terrain, which is terrain that's taller than it is. Taller than the operative, right? However, the active operative ignores parts of terrain within black of itself when determining this. Imagine them peering around a window, a ledge, or a corner as necessary. So things that have changed. Large intervening terrain, which we as kill teamers would think of as heavy terrain, terrain with the obscuring trait, is anything that's taller than the active operative, which means that in some cases, if you had very specifically sized terrain, you might get terrain that was treated as heavy terrain unless you were the Ogryn, and then if the Ogryn could just like peek over the top of the wall, or even just the top of his head was sticking up over the wall, then it wouldn't be heavy terrain. And the same I'm thinking of some of the Harlequin models that are like up on one, very tall because they're like up on one leg and doing a dance, and then the terrain's going to be treated entirely differently. I think this is a good rule of thumb, kill teamers, for people who are, if you're playing the full version of Kill Team and you have some non-standard terrain, because maybe you're playing at club and you've got whatever the 3D printed or MDF stuff that they have in that club is, and you've got like a random wall and you're like, is this light or heavy? Well, is it as tall as a guy? Then let's have it as heavy. Is it shorter than a standard guy? Let's have it as light. Doesn't mean we should do what they're doing for Kill Team Lite and apply that during the game and have it change for different models. But it does make a decent rule of thumb for using the non-standard terrain, which is quite nice. We've lost the language point at which a cover line crosses a terrain feature, and we're now just is the model this far away from the terrain feature or not? Is the active operative this far away or not? But if you look at the diagrams they provide, they've still got cover lines on the diagram. There's a line from the active operative going to either sides of the base of the target operative, and so it implies that you're still going to use the cover line idea to determine what intervening is. Because otherwise, technically, if the active operative, like from what's written on the page, if the active operative was up here somewhere, right? According to these rules, the active operative shooting the target operative would still be obscured because they're more than a circle away from the heavy terrain, even though the heavy terrain's not. So you still need to care somewhat about cover lines because you need to be able to define intervening, and that's exactly the kind of thing that is. It only really needs defining if people are going to try and break the game. Like, it's obvious to anybody playing the game what the word intervening should mean. It means in the way. Obviously, there are going to be edge cases where someone is like a little bit behind intervening terrain. And I think if you're playing Kill Team Lite with the lack of detail it has, you wouldn't, for example, go, well, his toe is behind the intervening terrain and therefore you can't shoot at him. I think kids playing the game would just be like, yeah, we can see him, let's shoot him. Does the cover lines thing and the strict interpretation of the rules for proper Kill Team and the fact that you can be obscured because of your the cover line like interacts with a tiny portion of your base, does that add or detract from the playing experience? I don't know. It's important to have tight rules, but the tighter you make a rule set, the more weird things that you create. The more you leave your rule set up to people to just go, yeah, it must be this, the more sense it's going to make to those individuals, but the less replicable it'll be for a tournament. And the beauty of this game is it clearly doesn't want to take itself too seriously, so it gives you some really simple rules for just getting going, which is great. Vantage points don't exist. There's no rules for vantage points now in Kill Team Lite whatsoever, so they're gone. And so combined with the lack of rules for climbing and traversing, I think Kill Team Lite basically wants two kinds of terrain in it. It wants chest-high walls and it wants like man-high walls, right? You don't really want to be trying to work out what you would do with a thing that looks like it could be stood on top of, but we haven't got any rules for climbing, or a thing that's like a pipe where it's thick, and then how do you move across it? Do you just, I guess if you're playing Kill Team Lite, you just move through it, right? Because there's no rules for traversing, so I guess you can just move through everything, so the thickness of terrain doesn't matter, really, and therefore, you know, if you wanted to make a terrain set for this, you'd just be having a battle between the full-size garden fence, right, and then the American-style picket fence, because in England we don't like to see each other, so we all have fences that are about 6 and a bit feet tall, right, between our gardens. No changes seem to be made to the special rules. So the special rules up here, they've just copied and pasted them. So this is the only part. Everything else in this pack has been rewritten, more or less, right? Even if they haven't changed the meaning of the sentences, that someone has retyped it. This is just the last 2 pages of the core rulebook, and they've made the font teeny tiny, and they've taken out the examples. So if you are a Kill Team player who plays, as I've called it here, Big Boy Kill Team, if you're playing Big Boy Kill Team and you wanted to print out the last page from this pack to put in your bag or whatever to have a quick reference for, that will work just as well. They've changed nothing, they've removed nothing, they've added nothing except for they've removed the examples and they've made the font teeny tiny. So that might be something that you want to do, although to be fair, there are other sort of summary sheets out there that you may find interesting. Okay, so final thoughts. Is this game playable, or did they gut too much? Give me your opinion in the comments. Is it something that people can actually find fun, or have they taken out too much? As I say, I run a club for the kids after school, so once we go back to school, once the new school year starts in September, and then I stop making daily videos, you know why, but I will print out, print out a dozen copies of this, and try and get the kids playing Kill Team Lite, right? Especially the New Year 7s. They're not going to buy a book, they're not going to sit down and read a whole book. This is simple, straightforward, and we'll get them pushing plastic around and rolling dice, which is what we want. Those of you who've been around on the channel a long time will remember that I have made a little series of videos on this question: how best to teach Kill Team. Is it with compendium teams? Is it by stripping out your own bits of rules and making your own version of Kill Team Lite? Is it with, I don't know why I'm pointing because you can't see, but up there I've got Warhammer Fire Team, the bookshelf game that they made. It's kind of another version of Kill Team Lite, I guess. This now probably is the way of doing it, especially with the free intercessor rules that came out at the same time. I mean, let me tell you, most kids in a school that turn up to a Warhammer club have intercessors. That's just what they have, because that's what comes in like the Recruit edition. And so now people will have, from their Recruit edition, they'll more or less have a legal Kill Team, right? Because they'll have the 5-man intercessor squad, and then the extra guy with the shield, who we can sort of proxy that as the sergeant. And some Necrons that they could use as well, So I think that's quite good. One of the major, only really flaws I can see with this is TAC Ops are in it, so they haven't been removed as being too complex. But some TAC Ops, I'm thinking off the top of my head, there's the Phobos TAC Op, isn't there, that makes it much easier to climb and jump. And so there is verbiage on the TAC Ops on some of them which refers to a concept that isn't in Kill Team Lite. Okay, so if you are playing this and you're using it to teach people, just be wary of that one when they say I want to use this not TAC Ops. I'm wrong, TAC Ops aren't in the game. TAC Ops are the objectives, aren't they? I'm talking, of course, about ploys. They go, I want to use this ploy, what does it do? And you have to be like, well, it doesn't really do anything. It will do stuff in the full version of the game. Why don't you save your points for now? This isn't the video I wanted to make today. I hope that today I'll be making a video entitled, Hey Look, Into the Dark's going on pre-order next week. Alas, it was not to be. Although if you read the entire of today's Sunday pre-order preview article, you will learn that it has something about information about the future of Kill Team. That would be interesting. So there will be, of course, more Kill Team news coming from Warcom in this coming week. In terms of release date, now the earliest The earliest it's going to go on pre-order is the 3rd of September. So if it goes on pre-order on the 3rd of September, you're now looking at going, well, if it's a 1 week pre-order, it's the 10th. If it's a 2 week pre-order, it's the 17th. Yeah, I know I keep saying it. I now think it will go up on pre-order on the 3rd of September. I think that's what will happen. Watch this space. Alright guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Cheerio folks, I hope that you have an excellent evening, afternoon, morning, whatever it is for you. Bye 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 bye.